Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flow Over Fear podcast, where it is our mission to help you to rise above fear and realize your ultimate potential in leadership and life. I'm your host, Adam Hill, and it is my goal to share with you the human side of high performance. My guests share their experience with fear, anxiety, struggle, challenge, and most importantly, despite all of it, how they rose above it to achieve incredible results. So, if you're ready to rise up, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this recap episode of Flow Over Fear. And today I want to talk about the interview that I just had with Brian Luebben. Now, in 2018, Brian was sitting in a cubicle in his corporate America job, looking at a picture that he took from an Airbnb of a property in Mykonos, Greece, that overlooked the ocean. And he was looking at this picture, visualizing himself standing on that very balcony, looking out at that ocean, having just achieved financial independence and is now traveling the world. Now, in 2018, that was just a vision, just a dream. But in 2022, Brian was standing on that very balcony, looking out at that very ocean at that very spot because he was renting that Airbnb. And he was spending his time having left corporate America, having gained that financial independence, and now he was traveling the world. Brian is truly a man that embodies that power of vision, of taking a vision and that that vision that he had for his life and turning it into reality through hard work and through trial and error. This was a really, really great interview, and I hope you'll go and listen to it. It's the last interview that I had on this show in the podcast. Please go listen to it because there's so many nuggets of wisdom here, because we didn't just get into this, hey, I want to leave my corporate job and I want to gain my financial freedom. It wasn't just about that. There are millions of stories about that, millions of places you can go to find out about that, many books you can read, and all sorts of resources you could find to leave your job, start a business, start investing in real estate, do whatever you want. But what we covered in this was some of the pieces that remain silent, which are what happens, as Brian says, what happens on the other side of leaving that job? What happens, when you get on a plane going to Mykonos, Greece, after having achieved your dreams and gaining that independence, and now you're going to travel the world and having panic attacks, which Brian had. Brian mentioned that he had 3 major panic attacks where, he thought he was having a heart attack after getting financial independence and pursuing his dream. The fear doesn't go away. And this is what I want to drive home, folks, is that fear does not go away. Fear stays with us. It's part of us. And the power of this story, the power of this interview was that this is a man who very early in life, learned that even though corporate America wasn't for him and he wasn't meant to wear a suit and tie anymore, and he was meant for something more, he recognized, I think one of the more important lessons that came out of this was that fear is the most important part of life. And that was the first time I've heard a guest say it, that it was the most important thing in life. I mean, on this show, we like to talk about embracing fear and where we can embrace fear, and when we do embrace fear, we're embracing something that is outside of our comfort zone and ultimately pushing ourselves to grow, because growth is on the same wavelength as fear. We grow when we lean into fear. But saying that it's the most important thing in life is a powerful, powerful statement. But it's one I believe to be believe to be true as well. And it's demonstrated by where Brian's going, because now, having gone through those trials and errors, he's come to realize that by leaning into fear and by using fear as a friend or a tool, that it is helping him to find his passion. He mentioned that you don't like that following your passion is terrible advice, which is a great statement, because passion is earned. And I believe, I agree with that, because I believe that passion is something that comes from going through the crucible of fear, of experiencing, of living through it, of asking the right questions, of learning to do the right things. And we do that in a number of different ways. And if you listen to the episode, Brian has a 4-phase process of how, we can transition in our lives, which I suggest you listen to. And I suggest you follow Brian as well, on his website at the Action Academy, to find out more about that process and where he goes. He gives it all away for free. Of course, you can join the Action Academy and learn a lot more. But he's given this stuff away, and it's gold. But the reality is that ultimately through that process, there's a number of elements that we need to look for in order to do that. And the first part is we need that vision. It's, as Brian put it, it's a GPS. Many people just kind of start driving in a direction as fast as they can, and the result is burnout. He even mentioned that the result is anxiety, depression, things like that, when you just push too hard and you burn out. But if you know what your life looks like, which is what Brian was doing in 2018 when he was sitting in his job, looking at the future him, that was important. And another important element that he stated about that was the fact that and this is something that's been repeated before by other people on this podcast, including Jamie Gruber, who said that we need to be running towards something, not away from something. Because when we're running away from something, it's really we're kind of running blindly, and we're not running in the direction of something that will fill us up. When we're running away from fear, or when we're fighting fear, we lose. But when we're rising above fear and we're running towards something we want, by embracing it, we are growing, and we're learning. And that's the important part of that visionary part, is knowing what you want, is really, really, really adhering to it. And then there's another element that was important, that's covered a lot in this show and in previous episodes. I call it the C word: community. I mean, we talk about it so much here, and so often it's overlooked. That community is probably the most critical piece of personal development. We need it, as Brian was saying. We need it when we're growing, when we have questions, but not only that, but when we're struggling, when we're going through that fear, when we're going through that crucible, when we're struggling, when we lose a loved one, when we're experiencing grief. Those are the times where we need that community. And we need that community to show us, to lead us by example. We need that coaching. We need that mentorship. And that's what Brian found. In fact, his coach asked him the right question when he was looking at leaving his corporate job. Because Brian was asking, well, how in the next 2 or 3 years or few years can I start to develop passive income to the tune of $15,000 a month, where I could replace, my other income? And his coach challenged him on that. And he said, well, okay, you want to do it in 2 years. How do you do it in 6 months? And, that led Brian down a path of saying that, that it can't be done passively in 6 months. There has to be something else. You have to find, maybe it's something else, some other revenue generating activity. And that was the distinguishing factor. That was the question that got Brian to be curious. And the coach led him down that path of the idea of like, oh, how can I build income over the course of 6 months instead of finding this passive income, which takes more time? And that's the primary differentiator between the 3 types of income. The first type of income that was brought up was the captive income. That's where you're working, where you're in a W-2, you're getting a paycheck, or you're getting a bonus, you're getting those kinds of things. That's captive income because you're in a job. You have to show up in order to get that income. The second type that people think of is the passive income. That's the income where you are generating mailbox money, where you have rentals, or where you don't have to work anymore to get that money. It's just comes from an investment through dividends, through whatever it may be, but it's all coming passively. That's where you get to sit on a beach and just collect a paycheck. But that is not fulfilling income because you're you may be sitting on a beach, but a few days after sitting on a beach, after you get financially free, if you're anything like me, or you're anything like Brian, or you're anything like any other person that wants to do more in this world, that wants to be free, that freedom, that desire for freedom often comes with this desire for to do more in the world, to just align with it, with the values, and connect with something different, to become something better, to become something more. And that doesn't come from sitting on a beach for the rest of your life, just collecting pay. For some it might, but not for those that truly want to have an impact in the world. For those people, they want to find their passion. And that's where passionate income comes in, which was a really powerful framing of how Brian framed that. That he went from passive to passionate income, that's what he wanted to find. That's what led him down the path of world travel and his podcast, The Action Academy, and his community, The Action Academy. And I am astounded, by the way, at how quickly Brian has been able to grow. And that's not by luck, my friends. It's not by luck. I've been, fortunate to be able to be a fly on the wall through watching his growth from a distance on social media. And I've watched because I love to see how people want to transform their lives in such a positive way and impact people. And it's been so great to see Brian just grow through this process, to see, him starting this podcast with a few hundred listeners at a time, to growing this podcast to hundreds of thousands of listeners, and continuing to grow, and growing his community to over 100 people within this community, is helping to get out of corporate life and get to become millionaires. And it's a powerful it's a powerful transformation to have seen, because we've been able to see the growth of a dream, the growth of a passion. It didn't start with this specific passion that, I'm going to help a million people leave corporate America and find their passions. No, it started, just like, I'm going to start a podcast, I'm gonna learn about it myself, and then I'm going to grow into it. As he said, and in developing, the what of what he wanted to do, and rising above that fear, that the fear part of it was a great part of this conversation. And if you listen to it for anything, that's a good part to listen to, because it showed that when we talked about fear, it showed that there's more to a transformation, and there's more experiences of fear. There's more of a relationship with fear than just the relationship you have when you're about to leave your job and you're scared shitless. Like you think to yourself, what if I can't make it on the other side? What if I can't do this? What if I can't do that? Well, my friend, what if you can? What if you can? What if you can start that business you've wanted to? What if you can start playing music and start playing the instrument that you've wanted to play? What if you can start playing that sport you've wanted to play? What if you can do that race that you've always wanted to run? What if you can work for this cause that you've always wanted to work for? What if you could leave your job and become something more? And those are the questions that we think are the only place that we experience the fear. But no, on the other side of taking that action, taking that leap, of embracing fear, we continue to feel it. We continue to feel some of that fear on the other side of it. Brian talked about that and told us how he experienced panic attacks, and how he leaned into an exercise that Tim Ferriss recommends called fear setting, which helps you to identify really what your fears are telling you, and the root of your fears, and also what the worst case scenarios really are. Because a lot of times, and what Brian found in his own life, and I think what is true for most of us, is that our worst case scenario is really our present day reality. So our worst case scenario is usually often our present day reality. And so if we choose to change, sure, it's going to be unknown, but we're setting a baseline of where we are now. And if we can go back to it, say you go back to back to a job or back to a career, what have you, that's the worst case scenario. And by fear setting, you kind of discover some of that stuff, and you learn the nature of the fears. Brian learned that his fear was ultimately a fear of failure. It was a fear of of looking like what he looked like to other people in terms of that failure. But what amazes me, what inspires me, is that despite that fear, and here's where the embracing of that fear comes in. That fear of failure, that fear of looking like you failed in front of people that you want to make an impact on, or what have you. That fear of ridicule from other people. What inspires me about Brian's story is that he, despite that fear, he showed his work anyway. And by showing his work, by showing how he got from leaving that corporate job to having a podcast and a community and a reach in the hundreds of thousands and leading to the millions, and becoming, independent and free and financially free, he has shown other people, not just himself, he's shown himself that he can do it, because he's shown us all that it can be done as well. If we're able to embrace that fear and lean into it. The power of community was one of the gold nuggets I heard again today. Every time I hear that, it reinforces in me that community is one of the most powerful things we can be a part of. Find that community. And I know a lot of people might be thinking these things, well, I don't have a community, I don't have this, I don't have that. They're within grasp. And the hard part about the part about community that's hard, especially for those of us who don't believe we have a community or don't want to lean into it, is a lot of times we're embarrassed because we're a newcomer, or we don't want to look like we're foolish by jumping into it, or we don't want to meet new people, or whatever it may be. But those are the first fears that you need to embrace. To embrace that fear and lean into that community anyway. Just lean into it. The worst that can happen is rejection. And if that rejection happens, you move on to the next one, and you may get rejected again, but you'll know that that's not the right community if it's a rejection. Once you lean into the community that supports, encourages you, it'll be supportive and encouraging. So the power of vision, the power of passionate income, and the power of learning to discover that passionate income were powerful takeaways from this week's episode. And I really hope you'll listen to Brian's episode. I hope you'll follow him, and I hope you listen to the Action Academy podcast. Brian is one of the people that gives away the most value that I know from his own lessons and from the lessons of other 7, 8, and 9-figure entrepreneurs. He's truly delivering it, and I hope you'll listen to his episodes of the Action Academy. I hope you'll look at you'll follow him, and thank you for joining me on this recap episode, and I'll see you next time. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Flow Over Fear podcast. If you'd like to learn more about getting into flow and learn the foundations of flow, I have a free video series on my website at www.adamcliffordhill.com called The Foundations of Flow. Feel free to go there and download it and start your journey to rising above fear and achieving greater flow in your life. And if you like this episode, and I'm guessing you did if you stuck around for this long, then please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, and you will receive notifications when I have new interviews, new recaps, and new trainings that pop up on YouTube. Thanks again for joining us.